In anticipation of Gaura Purnima. Gosh. Okay, we're back again. I thought it'd be nice to discuss pastime of Lord Chaitanya, and a nice one of many nice pastimes is Lord Chaitanya's exchange with King Prataparudra. Anybody new here and doesn't know who was King Prataparudra? You all know who was King Prataparudra. Good. One of my sannyas godbrothers, Badrinarayan Swami, has taken an interest of late in appreciating, trying to understand more deeply about the leadership in India at the time that Lord Chaitanya and the six Goswamis were living. We know so much here about the politics of things. But now and then we hear something about Aurangzeb. And during the time of the Goswamis, Emperor Akbar was ruling. And Emperor Akbar, that was in the western part. But there's history that shows when, even after Lord Chaitanya's departure, and there was some Mughal rulers in Orissa that were harassing the Vaishnavas with Akbar's permission, who was a bit of a Vaishnav, or appreciated Vaishnava rule very much, Vaishnava leadership, scriptures very much. This was after the time that Rupa and Sanatan left and Jiva Goswami was remaining. What I'm trying to do here is just paint a picture of the volatility of what was going on when Lord Chaitanya and his followers were in India, on earth, and doing their wonderful activities. Akbar, I came across the two references. One was three references. Akbar, because he was part of the Mughal rule, and there was a Mughal ruler who was ruling where Rupa and Sanatan were. But then Prataparudra was a very strong king, and the Mughal invasion, they couldn't do anything. They would attempt. When Rupa and Sanatan left government service, the Mughal ruler said specifically he had plans to take his armies and invade in Orissa, then going by a different name. So they were attempts. But Prataparudra's rule and his military skill was very strong. So Vaishnavism was protected. Imagine if his kingdom, which meant Jagannath Puri, was lost. Now, Vrindavan was in Akbar's rule, but he was a Vaishnav. He was a Mughal, an Islamic man, but he had deep appreciation specifically for Rupa Goswami and the teachings of the Goswamis. In the past 2 weeks, somebody went to the Vrindavan Research Institute, not far from the ISKCON temple, that is now the housing place of the Goswami Library that Akbar paid for. Akbar paid a visit to Vrindavan, specifically to meet Jiva Goswami. And he was so spiritually moved by Jiva Goswami that he volunteered, wasn't asked, he volunteered. He wanted to establish a library, a place for the writings of the Goswamis to keep it safe. So initially, research, it takes a while to get reasonably accurate research accomplished, but that library originally was at Jiva Goswami's place, which was the Radha Damodar temple. And the history says that a few generations earlier, that library was shifted because they weren't able to care for it properly. The manuscripts were deteriorating, etc., etc. So the head Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple shifted the library to the Vrindavan Research Institute, along with many other things. But there was an engraving in Urdu that Jiva Goswami placed along the side of where the library was, that very short, but Akbar was a Vaishnava and he protected the Vaishnavas in Urdu language. And there's another publication that's by Dr. So-and-so and his good wife so-and-so, connected with the Vrindavan Research Institute, that is written in Hindi, but its parts were translated into English because somebody sent me the English translation. And Jiva Goswami wrote Govindastaka in glorification of Govindadev, and it's carved inside the Govindadev temple in Sanskrit. And one of the ashtakas is specifically a glorification of Akbar. So one devotee went and took a photograph of the carving on the wall inside the Govindaji temple, the main temple hall, the Sanctum Sanctorium, that's how it was translated, and glorifying Akbar as in similar language. I don't have the language in front of me, but right in the wall. Appreciating Akbar being a Vaishnava and protecting the Vaishnavas. So although Aurangzeb was the opposite end of the spectrum, but during his time, here's something Bhadranayan Swami told me, the wealth of the Mughal Empire was at its peak during the time they were ruling in India, and the wealth was especially prominent in India, not only in the UP area, but the Mughal Empire. They took care of the Vaishnavas. I don't know what Bhadranayan Maharaj is reading, but he described that one of the things he read is they, at their expense from the royal treasury, they placed fruit trees up and down the banks of the river Jamuna between Vrindavan and Agra, so that sadhus could live near the banks of the river Jamuna and have their necessities just from the trees in shade, so they could sit peacefully and be sadhus. So they cared for, specifically apparently Akbar, cared for the Vaishnavas. But at the same time, there was always danger. One of the dangers, one of the gifts that Jiva Goswami did was it gives the name of his Chaduri, the tax collector person that oversaw the real estate of the king, Akbar, in the Vrindavan area. And for 35 rupees, I don't know if they had rupees at that time, but he purchased the whole tract of land all the way from where Sevakunj is, because the Radha Damodar temple was within the Sevakunj area all the way down to Imli Tal, down by the river Jamuna, and nearby places marked by trees. They're like a vast tract of land. And because the emperor was disposed, he arranged, he gifted the land for the Govindaji temple and the Madan Mohan temple, as well as agricultural land to maintain and support the deity. A very generous person. Not just generous, he was a Vaishnava. And particularly appreciated Jiva Goswami and the elders, Rupa and Sanatan's writings, etc. It said there was the biographies described, there was a dispute amongst the scholars in his area, Akbar's area, that were having a scriptural discussion on which is more sacred, the Jamuna or the Ganga. They couldn't reach a conclusion. Maybe you heard this one. And he requested Jiva Goswami to come to Agra to settle. And Jiva Goswami declined. He didn't want to leave Vrindavan. So Akbar sent him a royal carriage with fast horses, so he could leave early in the morning, go to Agra, speak transcendental wisdom that everyone accepted, and then get back before nightfall. And everyone was wowed, and the king was wowed, and he wanted to make a gift. Jiva Goswami declined. There's two versions. He finally accepted. He saw some royal paper that came from China. So you can give me some paper. Instead of writing on leaves, take some paper. Another version, and this is from the Vrindavan Research Institute, is he said you can get some of the Puranas from Benares, have copies made, and I can accept that. So during that, while that was going on, that benevolence of Akbar, at the same time, Jiva Goswami made the arrangements for Raghunath Das Goswami's body to be burned instead of put in samadhi, because it was known in other places that Muslims were digging up bodies of sadhus and mutilating them. So to avoid that mishap, he had his body and Krishnadas Kaviraj's body burned, and the ashes placed in the ground. And therefore, when you go to Radhakund, if you're a little observant, you'll see there's a samadhi inside the Gopinath temple of Raghunath Das, and there's another one where there's the Chin Goswamis, Raghunath Bhatta, Krishna Das, and Raghunath Das. There's two, because some ashes went here, some ashes went there. So while this is just what's going on with governance, it's Mughal rule. Akbar was just fine, but there are other places in Mughal Empire that weren't just fine. And so it was wonderful. During the time of Jiva Goswami, which was shortly after the time of Rupa and Sanatan, Akbar's rule made things nice. But things weren't nice in Bengal with Nawab Hussain Shah. And then just south of that is where King Prataparudra was. And there was, he and the predecessor kings were very strong. Very strong. And we know that the kingdom stretched deep into the south. At least part of his kingdom included Chennai, because Ramananda Roy was designated as the governor of that part of his kingdom. So he was powerful, but a great Vaishnav, King Prataparudra. So now we're on. The situation was volatile all around. All around. We don't hear so much the detail, but when Lord Chaitanya and when Shivananda Sain had to bring the devotees from Bengal to Puri from Bengal to Puri, they had to cross rivers and deal with all kinds of people, governances and robbers, and it was a volatile time. That was peaceful in Puri because of King Prataparudra. Not just that he was king, but he was a powerful king. He was a very powerful king and a great Vaishnava. So we start to hear about King Prataparudra when Lord Chaitanya comes to Puri as a sannyasi. And the conversion of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, which has its nice story. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the history of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is previously, before Lord Chaitanya's advent, he lived in Navadvip. He had a brother, and he, Sarvabhauma, and his brother were teachers and great scholars. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was such a great scholar that King Prataparudra invited him to become his chief priest in his kingdom, and accepted that service. So he moved, as part of the Leela of Lord Chaitanya before Lord Chaitanya's appearance. But he had a brother-in-law, Gopinath Acharya, that had remained behind and later moved to Puri. And Gopinath Acharya knew everybody. Gopinath Acharya knew all the Vaishnavas from Bengal. And that became an important part of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya coming to understand more about Lord Chaitanya and Lord Chaitanya's associates. So when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became a devotee, the king, who was close with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, asked, "Who is this sannyasi that's come? I hear about him." And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "He's not just a sannyasi. He's not just a saint. He's the personality of Godhead, and he's come to your kingdom. You're most fortunate." And Chaitanya Charitamrita says, the king had such faith in Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that just by hearing that, he accepted it. He was a great authority, and he said X and it's X. So he's the personality of Godhead. Can you please arrange an audience for me with him? Not so easy. And so this comes up as a theme again and again. Someone that wants mercy, but Lord Chaitanya wanted several things through King Prataparudra to teach transcendental lessons. The lesson of increasing attachment for a spiritual attainment despite obstacles. It's one of the themes in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maybe some of you listened to the Govardhan retreat. It was fantastic, where the topic of Burijan Prabhu in that recording, 5-part recording, but 3 parts are his class on Antya Leela chapter 4, which is Sanatana Goswami being tested, where there's the same theme, obstacles, and Lord Chaitanya lifted him and lifted him and lifted him and lifted him and made him come to the point of complete attachment to Lord Chaitanya, and then remove the obstacles. Like miracle. Not the same, but something similar. This anticipation, eager anticipation of King Prataparudra to get the direct mercy, audience, and darshan of Lord Chaitanya. So the first request was, it's not easy. I can try. but it's not easy. Then suggestions were made, and Lord Chaitanya didn't accept those suggestions, and then he started to travel to South India. The story of the Leela is many delays deliberately made by the Vaishnavas. Wait until this festival, wait until that festival. So Lord Chaitanya was responsive to, sensitive to, and even to a degree submissive to the requests of his devotees. But at a certain point he left. And King Prataparudra said, if he's the personality of Godhead, how'd you let him leave? How'd you let him leave? He's the independent Supreme Lord. He can do what he likes. So when he comes back, please make an arrangement for my audience with him. So for 2 years, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was gone. And when he came back, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya suggested to the king, please consider a suitable place for him to stay. And the king made the arrangement for him to stay at the house of Kashi Mishra. Kashi Mishra was intimately associated with the king, and a room it's called the house of Kashi Mishra, but it's not like a house. It's a palace with a big property and so forth. So Gambhira became his place, arranged by the king. And then some time passed, and the king is requesting again. And Lord Chaitanya declined. Lord Chaitanya declined on the grounds that I'm a sannyasi and I don't meet with worldly people. And some time passed, and the next thing was Lord with different prodding and massaging the topic a bit, Lord Chaitanya agreed to meet with his son, because the son is the representative of the father. So the son got the mercy, and the son later became a very important Vaishnav. Very important Vaishnav, Purushottam Jana. So when Lord Chaitanya, when he was in the association of Lord Chaitanya, the son of King Prataparudra got a lot of mercy. And when his father embraced his son, he felt ecstatic because of the ecstasy, the transcendental ecstasy that had been passed on to his son. But it wasn't the same. So that was reciprocation, but it wasn't the same. Then down the road of time, Purushottam Jana became a little older, and the whole episode of Gopinath Patanayak getting into a dispute with his son. You know that story? No? Yes, some of you do, some of you don't. Gopinath Patanayak was a title. His name was Gopinath, and the system at the time was, according to some service, one may be given a title. So the title Patanayak meant that he was one of 5 sons of Bhavananda Roy. Ramananda Roy was one of those sons. Ramananda Roy was given a post as the governor of, in the language of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madras. Vaninath Roy was another, Gopinath Patanayak was another, and 2 other brothers. So 5 brothers, sons of Bhavananda Roy. And they lived, the home of Ramananda Roy is a nice place to visit. It's not far from Alalanath. Alalanath is a close place. That's where Lord Chaitanya would it's a place where Lord Chaitanya would go when feeling separation from Jagannath after the Snan Yatra, the bathing of Jagannath, and he would go into seclusion and not being able to see. He was feeling such separation, he went to Alalanath, where there's a nice deity. And he, in the mood of separation, as you may have seen if you've been there, there's a giant flat rock where he would lie, and in the heat of separation, his body made depressions in the rock. It melted the rock. You can see it very clear, where his head and where his arms and shoulders and everything, feet. So near Alalanath is the place where Ramananda Roy lived, and I would assume the Bhavananda Roy and other family members lived. So his residence was not far. When he moved back to Puri, Lord Chaitanya asked Ramananda Roy in his South India tour, request the king for relieving you of the duty of being the governor so you can come and be with me. Immediately the king made the arrangement. Not only made the arrangement to relieve him of his duty, but gave him full payment, as if he was working for him as a governor. He maintained him, no problem. Now the situation with Gopinath was he had responsibility for part of King Prataparudra's kingdom for collecting taxes. And the arrangement was the taxes once collected would go to the king, or would go to the son of the king who gave them to the king. But the son detected that Gopinath was not giving all the money that he collected. He was pocketing more than there was some, so that the system was some percentage of what was collected would be the property of Gopinath, and then the lion's share would go to the king. But he was keeping more than what was due to him. And the king's son detected it. So he challenged Gopinath. I mean, it's a long story. It will take a long time to tell a long story. But Gopinath insulted him unnecessarily. He said, I don't have the money right now, but I can give you some horses, and then you can sell the horses, and that's a partial payment, and I'll pay the rest soon. So the horses were given, and the son had a grudge against Gopinath, so he gave a low price. And then Gopinath insulted him, saying, why did you give me a low price? The horses don't make a motion like this with their neck, because there was an idiosyncrasy of Gopinath that he would do like that. So he was insulted. He went to his father and said he won't give the money. His father said, well, get the money. Use some means to get the money. So he got authorization to get the money, but he didn't. He took it much further than that. He put him on a changa, which was a way of killing him by raised swords and moving a platform, and he would fall on the raised swords and be killed. It's a long narration. Devotees went to Lord Chaitanya, Gopinath is on the changa, do something. And Lord Chaitanya said, don't come to me with these things. This is material affairs. Gopinath is taking the money of the king and using it for dancing girls. So, he should be, the king has every right to punish him however he wants. Don't come to me again or I'm leaving Puri. I'll go to Alalanath. You won't see me again here in Puri. So they didn't want to say anything to Lord Chaitanya, but Gopinath's on the changa. And at any time, the platform can be pulled out and he's dead. So this and that, and the other thing, and the other thing, and the other thing, a lot of backroom conversation. They went to the king and said, are you aware? Gopinath is being put to death. by your son? What? I said, get the money by any means. I didn't say kill him. That doesn't get the money. He owes the money. Tell you what, take him off the Changa, and I'll reinstate him in the collection of taxes in the same place, and I'll double his salary, and I'll honor him with a silk, they call it a wrapper, like, something over your shoulders. It's an honorific gesture. And when Lord Chaitanya was told that, he said, why did he do that? I didn't ask for anything. Punishment is due. So King Prataparudra came to Lord Chaitanya and said, it's not because of you. I just have... Bhavananda Roy is like my brother, and his sons are like my sons. I have such love for them. And that's why I did. That's why I gave him his place back, and I doubled his salary, because it's just affection for Bhavananda Roy. And his sons are like my sons. Like that. King Prataparudra explained directly to Lord Chaitanya. It's true he had affection. And it's true they were capable. And everyone understood that was Lord Chaitanya's desire that he was saved. And especially Gopinath. So he learned an important lesson. And the king had a role to play. And helping him get the lesson and helping him get out of the difficulty that he was in. But it was a service unto Lord Chaitanya. That's the important thing. He was thinking, of course, that Bhavananda Roy's family is dear to me, but it's a service to Lord Chaitanya, because the whole Bhavananda Roy and his family were also very dear to Lord Chaitanya, especially Ramananda Roy. They were Lord Chaitanya's devotees, and he was doing a service for Lord Chaitanya devotees, which means doing a service for Lord Chaitanya. So it kind of escalates. Again, some time passed. King Prataparudra requesting, please make some arrangement for a direct audience. If he won't see me because I'm a king, then I'll stop being a king. I'll take up the life of a mendicant. Some kind of sign, I forget what's the sign of. What is it? A bone in his ear or something like that? What was it? There's some sign that people become mendicants. And they live in a certain way. I'll stop being king and I'll live as a mendicant. And Sarabhoma was saying, no. You should be the king. Everyone needs your protection. You're a powerful king. Be patient. So then some time passed. And as you see in this interesting painting that's on the screen here, on the left side, wearing a nice turban, is King Prataparudra, and he's watching Lord Chaitanya perform his dancing pastimes during the Rath Yatra of Jagannath, who was in the background, riding on the Jagannath cart. It's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Lord Chaitanya performed a pastime like Krishna, where Krishna was sitting with each of the cowherd boys, and the cowherd boys thought that Krishna was looking at me alone, but Krishna was expanding himself. Or Krishna and the gopis, and Krishna expanded himself, and the gopis were thinking Krishna is with... Shh. The gopis were thinking Krishna is with me, but he was with each of the gopis. So similarly, Lord Chaitanya had 7 kirtan parties, and he expanded himself. He expanded himself into 7 Lord Chaitanyas and danced within each of the kirtan parties. And the devotees were thinking, he's very attached to us, he's staying with us alone. no one could see this except King Prataparudra. It's specified. Lord Chaitanya showed mercy by giving him that vision. And he gave him that vision because at the beginning of the Rath Yatra, he came out with a broom and swept the road in front of Lord Jagannath as a very humble servant of Lord Jagannath. Being pleased with him like that, he gave him this darshan that others couldn't see. And then the next and kind of the main climax of this whole Leela is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had trained the king to recite some verses from the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And when Lord Chaitanya would go into the Jagannath Vallabh gardens, the cart would stop, people would make offerings, and he would go to rest. When he goes to rest, don't wear your nice royal attire, just wear a simple Vaishnava attire, and massage his feet when he's resting, and recite verses from the Bhagavatam, and he'll be very pleased. So following Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's advice, that's what King Prataparudra did. And as Lord Chaitanya was hearing the verses of the Bhagavatam, he became ecstatic and said, "Whoever you are, you're doing such wonderful service. You're very dear to me," and he embraced him. Now, yeah, if I remember correctly, I had a different idea of what I would speak about during this visit, but it changed in the car ride on the way over. When Lord Chaitanya fell when dancing, he crashed to the ground. The king picked him up. Lord Chaitanya recognized this was the king. No, horrible. I've been touched by a worldly person. And the king felt bad. So, step by step by step, the kind of obstacles and more obstacles and more obstacles, getting closer, but more obstacles, and then Lord Chaitanya removing the obstacles. And that was to teach a lesson. It was to teach a lesson, among other things, to persons in the renounced order, that they should not associate with worldly people. Now, King Prataparudra wasn't a worldly person. He was a king. I mean, there were others who were householders that they were very close associates, including Lord Nityananda, who became a householder. So it's not because he was a householder, but he was it's written pound, shilling, pence man. A person who has a lot to do with finance and government is often not clean activity. So he didn't want to have his association. However, fast forward in time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur invited the governor of Bengal to visit Mayapur. And some of his associates started criticizing him. Lord Chaitanya wouldn't associate with a worldly government person. Why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? And Bhaktisiddhanta had two objectives, which were fulfilled. He knew that there wasn't a good road to get to the temple. The Chaitanya Math had a little ox cart path, and you don't bring the governor of Bengal down an ox cart path, so they paved the road. With British money, the British workers came and paved the road from the Ghat, which is how he came up the river, then from the Ghat to the Chaitanya Math to meet with Bhaktisiddhanta. So he got a nice road now to bring paper for his printing presses up and down. And the second purpose was that he wanted the governor to acknowledge that the actual birth site of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was on this side, not that side of the Ganga. And he accepted it, seeing and hearing. And so verification was, there was a post office that was set up almost across from the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, identifying it specifically in Bengali, of course, as the birth site of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu post office. So, government confirmation. And I'm mentioning that because we should imitate. He wanted to teach something, and he taught it. It's not, but at the same time, when Prabhupada had, for example, also had opportunity to meet with different people, government people or intellectual people or professor people or whatever people, he wanted to meet with them because he understood when yad yad acharati shreshtas, whatever great people do, if some great personalities become kind and influenced by Krishna Bhakti, then many people will follow, many people will be benefited if they follow. So he wanted that. Just like the king of was it Vishnupur, where the books of the Goswamis were stolen, and then later they were recovered by Srinivasacharya, and he became a Vaishnava, and his whole entourage became Vaishnavas, and that was a very important step in the expanding of Krishna consciousness. So when leaders become accepting of Krishna consciousness, it helps the spreading of Krishna consciousness. Certainly, one should be cautious when doing those things. But it's part of a strategy, and I think I'll end with this, just a little sharing. A week ago, the Boston City Council, they have a system where at the beginning of each council meeting, their monthly meetings or something like that. I don't know how regular they are. Maybe they're quarterly. But they have persons of different religious backgrounds make a little something, invocation, something at the beginning of their council meeting. The council meeting, I got a YouTube link. The council meeting lasted a little over an hour. I didn't attend the council meeting, but at the beginning, Paramarupa and Atulia were invited to speak because he's a chaplain at Northeastern University, and he was known for how well he's doing there, and so he was invited to speak, and so he spoke. It was nice. It was simple, and little kirtan because he sings very nicely, and the city council got to hear. So that's nice. So should we, or particularly he's a householder, should Vaishnavas be allergic to meeting with government people? Not really. Now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made a big point about it. And if one has an opportunity for something like that, one should be wary. Not because it's one of the internal contaminations that block or obstacles for spontaneous devotion to Krishna. Raghunath Das Goswami writes, is having more interest in those people than Vaishnavas. So it's purposeful. It's not, having a celebration. Let's do what we do so we can get some of that nice, acclaim. It's practical for cultivating Krishna consciousness through those who can help influence Krishna consciousness spreading. Okay, so a little bit of a meandering. I wanted to discuss King Prataparudra. And the story of King Prataparudra spans several chapters, and it kind of rises and falls, and other things happen, and then it becomes prominent again. And step by step, a very sincere, very elevated Vaishnava wanting Lord Chaitanya's mercy directly, and not giving up, not becoming frustrated, not becoming, maintaining determination, and different tests and passing the tests. And so our journey to get such mercy may have its obstacles too, our internal and external obstacles. But the path of spiritual life requires having that eagerness and determination, and depending upon Krishna to overcome obstacles. And his friendship with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya helped a lot. Because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya understood the heart of Lord Chaitanya, and the heart of Lord Chaitanya was softened by these two main things. Well, three main things. Service to the Vaishnavas, service to Lord Jagannath in a humble mood, and speaking the message of Srimad Bhagavatam very nicely, as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had trained him. And that combination brought the response from Lord Chaitanya that he was wanting. And for the rest of his life, he was, a very elevated Vaishnava. Very, very elevated Vaishnava. He knew his place. He didn't feel, I'm the king, and so I have my rights and privileges. He was very humble. Maybe some of you have seen that painting. I'll just describe it rather than trying to get it on the screen here. King Prataparudra commissioned an artist to make a painting of him with Lord Chaitanya and his associates. Now, many such paintings are kind of like people stand together and, with a photograph. But even before it was photography, it was just portraits. But so what the artist was commissioned to draw was a scene at Narendra Sarovar, where there's a big Sarovar, a big lake, where festivals for Lord Jagannath are held in that lake. When Jagannath comes out of the temple for this and that and the other festival, the deities are put, or the Utsav deities are put in a boat, and they move around the lake and come back in and do different things, and then go back to the temple. So there's many such festivals. So that's Narendra Sarovar, and by the painting you can see the water in the foreground because there's ripples in the water, and then there's a black and white checkerboard pattern, which is the area just surrounding Narendra Sarovar. And there's Gadadhar Pandit reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. One might think he would commission a kirtan, but it was Gadadhar Pandit reciting Bhagavatam. There's Lord Chaitanya, there's Lord Nityananda, there's Haridas Thakur, there's Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, there's Advaita Acharya, there's Srivas Pandit, there's Ramananda Roy, and all the Jagatananda Pandit, and the significant Vaishnavas, where he's prostrated before them all, with his arms extended, full dandavats, paying obeisances to all the Vaishnavas, while they're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. It's a nice painting. And that was his heart. He's a humble Vaishnava, although powerful ruler. Powerful ruler, but a great Vaishnava. So that was the scene during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Here's another little history. The northern parts of Orissa weren't as well protected as his kingdom. And there's some history that I read where there was some, during the time of Rasikananda, there was some harassment. And Rajman Singh, who was from Rajasthan, but was in the service of Akbar, because Akbar was a Vaishnav, he got permission from Akbar to go all the way across the country and smash the people that were harassing the Vaishnavas and drive them away so that the Vaishnavas could be protected. I mean, war is not a new thing. And it's important to have a benevolent king that also is a qualified kshatriya, and when it is time to do something, But that, that's not, it's not the current time. But that time there were such kings, and because there were such kings, Vaishnavism was protected. The Vaishnavas and Vaishnavism. And when Aurangzeb came into power, the opposite end of the pole, and it was a very different story. So even devotees of Lord Chaitanya had their challenges dealing with worldly people or cruel people. It's not a new thing. But there's principles and standards to live by in the sense of being protected even in difficult circumstances. So King Prataparudra was such a protector. It certainly could have been that Lord Chaitanya just acknowledged he's not a worldly person, although he has the post of a king, and just accept him. But he my understanding is, or at least one perspective is, he put him through a series of obstacle challenges to increase and build and sustain his determination, and then remove the obstacles. Sometimes that happens, and in lives of great devotees, and sometimes may happen in our lives. Obstacles are not something to be too terribly worried about. We address them, but we rely upon Krishna and the sincerity of purpose. It's something, the example is given to test gold, it's made molten, or to remove the alloys of gold, it's made molten, and then the alloys can be removed. So sometimes adversity and obstacles and so forth are difficult or painful. And on the bright side is, it increases, the potential is to increase our dedication and devotion to the objective of being connected with Krishna very nicely, without, the other stuff that's inside, that doesn't belong there. Okay, so that's King Prataparudra topic. See if there's some discussion. There's a number of nice paintings of what you see on the screen here, for those of you that can see the screen. But it's this is an interesting design, this style of this artist. Comments or questions?
Yes. Sorry. Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for this wonderful narration of Prataparudra there. There's a little kind of historical background of Maharaj Prataprudra, and that part of the country, they believe that because Prataparudra became a Vaishnava, he neglected his kingly affairs, and those of Muslim who were till then constrained up to Bengal, they could conquer Orissa. And after that, they broke many temples, including Jagannath temple.
Including which temple?
Including Lord Jagannath's temple. They do a lot of harm there, a lot of bloodshed, all the Muslims. And that part of the country, they believe that it's because Maharaj Prataprudra neglected his service towards protecting his. So how do you see
I'm
that?
unaware of that history.
Sorry, I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's a belief that way. Many people in that area believe that way. And it's a fact, actually. After that, Prataparudra was the last king in that dynasty, and after that it was taken over by the Muslims, and they broke many temples. I mean, that question was there in my mind. Sorry, I just asked it.
I'll ask Badri Narayan Swami, because he seems to have a book that answers this, and see if what you say concurs. Because my experience is there's lots of history out there that's not what real history is. Prabhupada didn't spend so much time in giving us those worldly histories, but sometimes he would speak. And I'm not so sure that it's true that he was neglectful of his Kshatriya duties because he became so Vaishnava-like. But there's I know 2 or 3 devotees that likely would know what history text to consult. I'm curious to find out if what this history that's popular in Orissa today is a fact.
Sure.
I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't.
He was the last king of the Gaja.
Now, being the last king doesn't mean he was neglectful of his duties.
Right, but he did lose. So he was attacked. Actually, he didn't lose it to Nawab Hussain Shah. He lost it to Krishna Deva Raju. So the kingdom to his south, Vijayanagar dynasty, they were the ones who conquered. So he was attacked simultaneously by Nawab Hussain Shah and by Krishna Deva Raj. And then he actually lost his kingdom to Krishna Deva Raj. And
The one from the south.
the one from the south. So he married his daughter to Krishna, and he gave a big chunk of his kingdom. And then Nawab Hussain Shah also came in and took from the west. He carved
So
out.
you're quite familiar with his history, sounds like.
So it is. I read it in. There's a book by Dr. Obiel Kapoor,
Yes,
and he
mentions
he
this.
talks about it in that book.
Well, that sounds authoritative. O.B.L. Kapoor is sounds like an authoritative source. Do you know which book?
I think the title of the book is just Gauranga. It's a book on Mahaprabhu. It's a
Okay.
thick book, and I read it many years ago. But he has blended all the 3: Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, and Chaitanya Mangal. And then he has also put some historical research.
So the title of it is Gauranga.
I think it's Gauranga. I have the book. I can check it. And
Oh, you have the book.
I have the book. Yeah.
Okay. Because my magic computer has many writings. I may have that book if it's in print.
Okay. I'll take a picture and send it to
Okay.
you.
Okay. Interesting. So that happened during his lifetime, not because Purushottam Jana was not up to the mark.
Purushottam Chandra, I think he was king for only only 1 year or less than a year, he was usurped by a minister of his, Purushottam Jana. He was a king for a very, very short, maybe a few months actually. And then he was assassinated by one of his ministers who took over the kingdom. Kalia somebody. He was like a low-class Shudra, but he conspired and did stuff, and he assassinated him and took over the kingdom. What was left of it? But in that region, what Prabhu is saying is correct, that they actually consider Maharaj King Prataparudra
was slack in his duties.
Because of two reasons. One was because of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, because they were in the employ of Nawab Hussain Shah.
Yeah.
And second was because of his devotion to Mahaprabhu.
And both of those made him weak? Or neglectful?
Neglectful, yeah.
Well, why Rupa and Sanatan? I mean, it maybe make Nawab vengeful.
Yeah, not sure about Rupa and Sanatan, but my sense is it is conspiracy theories that Rupa and Sanatan were in employ of Nawab Hussain Shah, and Nawab Hussain Shah sent them to weaken the emperor. So it's more in the realm of conspiracy theory, less factual.
What? Rupa and Sanatan was sent by Nawab to weaken the king?
By getting him more interested in spirituality.
Oh, that's silly.
So it's more in the realm of conspiracy theories.
More in the realm of?
It's more in the realm of conspiracy theories, not being much factual.
Well, the actual public probably don't stress much upon that conspiracy theory. They believe that because of this movement, not only King Prataparudra, but
not only the king, but all the citizens also, they were so engrossed in Vaishnavism, they neglected their duty as well as a soldier.
Well,
that
sounds like an atheistic view, because Vaishnavas don't neglect their duty.
I agree.
I don't buy into it, I'm sorry.
I mean, that part of the country, they believe that way.
Well, historians can write history books. You know, just like how does America write the American history? And they write it their own way. And then you know, people that are more honest come along and rewrite the history books. You know what I mean? How the American Indians were dealt with. Oh, it's really sad. And you know, but that's not in American history books. So, I'd like to see what Govial Kapoor has to say, because he's not likely to hop on the bandwagon of atheists. Too much devotion to Lord Chaitanya will make you weak or neglectful of your duty. That's not what happens. That's not what happens. Look at Akbar. He didn't become weak. I don't buy it. And the narrative that he was defeated, okay. But why? Too much bhakti. Neglected, and all the people neglected their duties, so they were pushovers for vicious kings. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the lovely talk. I was just meditating on the fact that Rudra Pratap was such an elevated devotee, right?
He was what?
Elevated personality.
Yes, he was.
And still it took him so long to get the mercy of Mahaprabhu. So what to speak of fallen people like me? So what hope do I have?
Oh, you're probably in a better situation. There's several things. The disqualification was he was a king. That's not your disqualification. Too much dealing with power and money and, politics. That's not your disqualification. You're probably, you don't have that disqualification. You're in better shape.
But what about the distracted mind?
What about the distracted mind? That's another thing. Yeah. But, your specific question was, the initial question was, if he had so much difficulty, then what about me? I'm a small person. But the small persons don't have all those attachments and distractions. The big contaminations, because contamination can easily come from association with worldly affluence and power. And Lord Chaitanya wanted to teach a lesson for those who are spiritually elevated to not be after worldly people. He wanted to teach that lesson. And he was giving him an opportunity, like with Sanatana Goswami, to checkmate him until he just had no other shelter but his mercy. So if you get that opportunity, you're really in good shape. Anything else?
Thank you, Maharaj, for the question comes around what you spoke just now, like false shelters.
Yeah.
So how do we drop from the false shelters? Like keep taking, although for some time, like during lectures and others, you feel like you have to take shelters, but then again we go back to the false shelters again.
Well, your question is, how do we leave conditioned life and come to transcendental life?
Yes. We feel like glimpse of transcendental, but then again fall back.
Yeah. The glimpses keep us going, and the fallback keeps us staying. There's many things to say on this topic, but in simple terms, it's a gradual process. The unsteady bhakti precedes steady bhakti. And so what's needed is steady bhakti. We need to steadily practice with faith. Because just to get to this stage where there's some glimpses, that's progress. And get to the stage where you recognize there's things holding me back, that's progress. It's progress that we didn't recognize before. We didn't know what all the stuff that's going on in there. And, attachments and et cetera, et cetera. Anarthas. We didn't have a clue. We're just being nice people that didn't have a clue. So there's progress. And to go beyond the ups and downs of unsteadiness, it's the anarthata vritti stage. There are teachings that help us understand what, and then there's association that helps us apply the what. One word answer is sadhusanga. And from sadhusanga, impacted in that sadhusanga is bhajana kriya. And that's how we move along the anarthata vritti stage. Seek the association of those who are more advanced than you are and serve them, hear from them, and get mercy from them. Those that are, available to you in everyday life, and those that are great acharyas that may not be available to you in everyday life, like our founder Acharya and Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the previous acharyas and their writings. As they're distributing, they can release us from that bondage. As I'm speaking, I'm thinking about the topic that I've been preparing for Memorial Day weekend. It's right in Raghunath Das Goswami's writings. He calls them robbers, plunderers, with ropes, and they put their ropes around your neck and drag you. This and that and the other. And the recommendation that he makes is you call out loudly for the help of the devotees of the killer Bakasura. The Baka is chosen because, now this is even before Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote what he wrote, but Baka is the emblem of hypocrisy, appearing one way, but his intention, his heart is something else. And there's hypocrisy that dilutes others, and there's hypocrisy that dilutes ourselves. We need strength. We get strength from the bhakti process itself, or even more specifically from Balaram, or the representatives of Balaram, the spiritual masters, plural, shiksha gurus, and persons that can teach by example and teach by their words, and just continue to strive in that direction with those personalities that you resonate best with. And that's the how-to. Go from unsteady to steady. And that is how to overcome the subtle things within, the internal relief from contamination or conditioning. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. First of all, thank you so much for your personal association and a lovely talk. I had two questions. The first one was about, you spoke about adversity, and we are discussing about all eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Adversity is coming in their life.
Yes.
We know that the outcome is going to be positive for them. But when it hits us, with so much of material attachment that I have, how do I stay grounded and keep going and have faith that it's going to be good at the end?
Well, your question is different, but quite similar to his question. Language is different, but the question is quite similar. I'm here, and and how do I get there? Same principles. So, the faith word is a very important word in your question. But faith is created by the association of those who have faith. And faith is created by acting in knowledge. And then comes we don't always act in knowledge. We know what, but we do something else. So continue to associate with those that know what to do and are doing it more than you are. Seek for advanced association. And open yourself to their kindness and etc., etc. But don't become over-dependent. You seek association and try to serve them and serve according to the instructions they give. Because that's a demonstration of a relationship with an elevated person. They're not meant to carry you, they're meant to guide you. And when you act that way, then you act in knowledge, then faith increases. Very simple principle. When you act in knowledge, faith increases, because something happens when you act in knowledge. You get a realization. And when you get the realization, you go, wow, that was good. So that nourishes faith. It's quite simple. In principle, it's quite simple. Application is another. But you carry on with faith. Don't become complacent. Next.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. The second one is, I was listening to your talk about Raghunath Das Goswami, and he's so enthusiastic to be with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and leave everything. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells him, no, you have to be situated and take care of your duties.
He said, crossing the ocean of material existence is not easy. Be patient. Go on and do your duties as if you're attached, but don't be attached. And time will come, you'll have the opportunity to be with me.
It's so difficult to practice.
Well, you have a whole lifetime ahead of you. Hopefully. Unless something untoward happens between now and then. That's the opportunity. There's the adversity, and then there's the opportunity.
So I was just meditating on, the spiritual practices that we do. We have one goal in mind, that please, Radha and Krishna, engage me in your service. And then I was thinking, after listening to this Raghunath Das Goswami's example, that there's also a goal that we should have to please make me as an instrument in whatever things and people that we have in our lives. So I just wanted to know, are they both the same goals?
Nice question. One answer is there are different manifestations of the same outcome, because being in Radha and Krishna's service means serving those who are dear to Radha and Krishna. And if we hold persons in that regard, as they're dear to Radha and Krishna, that we serve them in that way, that's Radha and Krishna's service. Now, as consciousness becomes elevated, then, all kinds of things happen. Besides those that are dear to us, the circles expand. And as we make spiritual progress, the direct sense of being engaged in Radha and Krishna's service becomes deeper, meaning, they're eternal associates. Which sounds maybe a contradiction. One develops compassion for many, and one's focus of service becomes a select few. But it's the heart of one who is engaging in service to others as consciousness becomes elevated. And so it may sound like two different things, or even a contradiction, but it's not. They're connected. It's what service of Radha and Krishna means in practical terms. Online? Okay, let's go online.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, this question is from Sri Padma Manjari Mataji. Sometimes we notice there are obstacles after obstacles as never ending as in my own life. Am I supposed to think it's a test of devotion, me paying for my past misdeeds, or just the Lord mercy in purifying me? I do know it could be worse. Please enlighten me.
Well, obstacles are there because it's just the nature of the place. It's not necessarily, this past misdeed is causing this current obstacle, and that past misdeed is causing that obstacle, and there's a one-to-one correlation between past misdeeds and the obstacles. Not necessarily like that. Rather, it's just the nature of the place. And there may be some multiple causes for some obstacle or combination of obstacles, but to keep it simple, rather than part of the part of the difficulty in going through the phase of anartha nivritti is feeling bad about ourselves, rather than feeling enthusiastic to reach Krishna, because that being enthusiastic to reach Krishna is going to help have the strength and the wisdom and everything we require to address the obstacles in a positive way. It's the mood of service that carries us forward and beyond the obstacles. So to pinpoint where the obstacles are coming from, what's the purpose behind the obstacles, is you can do that. You can try to do that. However, don't get it often has the effect of getting distracted from what the real mission is. The real mission is becoming, back to his question, being in Radha and Krishna service. You can be in Radha, you can chant Hare Krishna in any circumstance. It's true. Even if it's within the mind because you can't breathe. Anyway, with this COVID thing that's going around, some people just have to chant in their mind. Anyway, past misdeeds or not, the obstacles are what they are, and you're overcoming them is not by tracing out what their origin is. You're overcoming them is taking full shelter of Krishna in a mood of trying to please Krishna, trying to be in Radha and Krishna service, and serving the message of the great souls. That's our shelter. Is this the same girl from yesterday evening? The playful one. Okay. Something else.
Next question is from Rajesh Sharma.
Shh.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, who was King Prataparudra in his past life or Krishna Leela?
I can look it up when we're done. I don't know offhand.
And there is like a 4-part question from Harsha Ravnikar Prabhu. I heard that Akbar was Vaishnava and Kshatriya. Is there any evidence for this?
Jiva Goswami, as the authoritative person who says this twice, I mentioned the two places he mentions it.
Whom did he order attack against to protect Vaishnavas?
Who did he give order to do what?
Attack against to protect Vaishnavas.
An antagonist?
Attack.
Against.
against whom Mansingh attacked, but whom he drove away. That's what he took.
Who did Man Singh drove away? There was somebody in the eastern side of India. There was somebody in the eastern side of India. These two girls together is too much. Like, one is enough. Two is too much.
I think there is a Taki Khan. That was the person whom Mansingh drove away.
Well, you know the history, huh?
That part of it.
Okay. Well, I came across this anyway. I don't know the name. I came across it in relation to when Shamananda was preaching. He came across some terrible kings, and Man Singh came to help. But I just remember that vague kind of picture of things. Go ahead, next.
So next one, he wanted to know the book name.
Which name?
The
OBL Kapoor's book name? He wants to know the book name. Karanga.
I can send it. I think it is the life of Goranga.
Next. That's it. Previous life, King Prataparudra. Boy, I hit some landmines in the course of that topic. I'll look up the Prataparudra question and give it to you, and you can send it back to him when I find out. Oh, Lord of Meditation. Well, it doesn't give. He doesn't give the name.
Thank you, Maharaj. Is it Indradupna Maharaj from Jagannath's pastime?
I don't know. But who was he in Krishna Lila? Let's see. Maharaj Prataprudra, who was as powerful as Lord Indra, had formerly been Maharaj Indradumna, who began the worship of Lord Jagannath. So if he's as powerful as Lord Indra, but at the same time he got pushed around by other kings, doesn't tally somehow. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, Ki Jai.